Welcome to the Early Edge NFL Player Prop Show, brought to you by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I am your host, Eric Cohen, otherwise known as EC. We are glad to have you with us here. It is Friday afternoon. It is the best time of the week. And before we bring in the stars of the show, let's pull up the recap screen because we have a new component to it. Proppy's going to talk about it, but if you're watching this on YouTube, look in the bottom right. We have our season records for transparency. He will tell you more about it. I had a rough one with those Seattle and San Francisco players. I weighted them differently. Proppy will explain that. So last week was a more than 2-unit loss for me. Proppy is crushing it. Uncle Dave, after starting 0-4, he is 12-7 since, and he is up. Has been profitable to listen to him since. So let us bring in the stars of the show, and we'll get right to it. We have 16 or more picks on this week's show, so no time to waste. We have the greatest prop bettor on the planet, and everybody knows it, even certain casinos across the country. It is one, Propstarz. And then we have the smartest fantasy football expert on the planet, who, let me say, I'm still getting text messages from my league mates saying, don't you want to listen to Uncle Dave? I mean, at this point, he faded Bijan Robinson weeks ago. I should have traded him when Uncle Dave said so. That is why you read it on CBSSports.com. Just want to point that out. All right, Proppy, let's get started with you. Tell us about weighting picks. You're up already more than 4 units. Why? How do you weight certain things for people that are new? And how do you want to describe this to everyone?
Yeah, so moving forward, I'm always thinking about ways that we can improve both the legitimacy of this show, make this a better experience, more educational for our viewers, and help in any way we can. One thing I thought that we could really benefit from was not just tracking our win-loss, but tracking our units won and lost. That's really the indicator ultimately of our success. Obviously, majority of these bets are going to be just standard 1-unit plays. Typically, 1 unit represents between 1 and 2% of your bankroll. However, there are instances where I feel my edge is larger, or Dave will feel his edge is larger. And in that situation, we have more confidence in a play, and that could be a 1.5 or maybe a 2-unit play. Those are pretty rare for me, I think, and also for Dave. But yeah, again, there's going to be spots that we absolutely love that I personally would encourage a slightly bigger bet. So wanted to just provide even more transparency to the viewers. This is how I personally track my results and success over the course of a season. So happy to answer any questions the chat has regarding having a bankroll and tracking your units won and lost. But yes, moving forward, we're going to be using the unit system.
Uncle Dave, Babe Ruth called his shot in the 1932 World Series, and you called your shot in week 2 of the Friday Prop Show because you said after an 0-4 start, this is inexcusable. Since then, you are 12-7 and extremely profitable. Give us some good vibes.
The vibes are simple. I kept it simple, and I even kept it in mind this week because you saw on the recrap screen. It's kind of how it felt. Recrappy. Because I went 2-2. I wanted to be better than that, and I'm still looking for that perfect week. So as long as I'm not hitting on all cylinders, I want to stick with the basics. And the basics are simple. Trust players that are playing a lot and that there's a good track record on, one way or the other, whether you like the over or the under on a certain player prop. And the other thing that I just want to keep in mind is, you don't have to take every bet. We're here to give you a ton of bets. I think it's kind of insane if you put your hard-earned money on everything we say. But if you listen, you watch, and you consider what we say, you'll say to yourself, oh, yeah, Propstarz makes sense. Or what the hell is Uncle Dave thinking? There's no way I would put down even a quarter of a unit on what he's saying. So be smart with your bets. It's good life advice to just be smart with your money in general. But certainly if you're going to bet, be smart about it. Don't take every bet that we say. Just hear us out on it.
Jay Kane in the chat asks, what is a unit size? That varies for everyone. For mine could be $50. Uncle Dave's could be $500. Propstarz could be $5,000. We don't know. It just depends on, and yours could be $5. I mean, who knows? Prop, you have any insight on unit sizes?
Yeah, so everyone's unit size is going to be unique to the individual bettor. Typically, as a general rule of thumb, I would say between 1% and 2% of your bankroll. So if you were wagering $100. At one unit would be $1 to $2, $1,000, $10, etc. So, as a general rule of thumb, I would say 1 to 2%, 2% if you're looking to be a little bit more aggressive, 1% if you're looking to be a little bit more conservative.
Fair enough. All right, go ahead, Uncle Dave.
I just wanted to say that if you're watching, maybe you're just now getting into sports handicapping and you kind of are just dipping your toe in the waters. There's nothing wrong if your budget is $100 and your unit size is $1 or $2. Man, it's supposed to be fun. You're not supposed to get rich off this.
Unless your name is Propstarz. All right. So let us start with the man that I just mentioned. Time for receiver props. We got one of the highest total games of the week, Baltimore and Washington. Proppy, you are going to start us off on the Baltimore side with Zay Flowers. Over or under?
We're going over, and EC, we're going way over for Zay Flowers. Love him over 54.5 receiving yards. This is going to be a 1.5 unit play for me as well. One of my favorite props on the board this week. Zay Flowers entering his second year. The expectations were high. He was expected to be the focal point of this Baltimore passing attack, coming off of a strong rookie season. Got off to a slow start, however. I have been very encouraged by a number of things, including last week's performance, where he finally had a good game coming off of his best game of the season. I think he keeps the momentum rolling, heading into just a salivating matchup against a Washington Commanders team that is a porous pass defense. Also, with the emergence of Jaden Daniels, who has been absolutely fantastic. Not only is it a great matchup because they're a bad pass defense, but they're also very capable of pushing Baltimore into a pass-heavy game plan as well, which I anticipate being very likely in this matchup with a high projected total here. So I love Zay Flowers. As I've mentioned with Washington, they double team at one of the lowest rates in the league. They also play a tremendous amount of man coverage. Zay Flowers, despite not playing particularly well this year, has been excellent against man coverage, owns a 3.48 yards per route run against man coverage, which is an elite mark. So this is a great spot for Zay Flowers, who I expect has triple-digit upside in this matchup. So you best believe I will be laddering Zay Flowers, and I will be hammering those alt lines all the way up to 100 yards.
All right. Love hearing that, except when I'm facing him in certain fantasy leagues. Now, Uncle Dave, on the other side, Terry McLaurin on the for the Commanders. Are we going over or under? I know he's been on a hot streak, but what are you thinking?
I'm thinking he's going over, and I'd like the over on 4.5 catches. I found it at -111 from BetMGM. And I'll tell you, man, I think the Ravens secondary, sort of a mixed bag. They were terrible against the Bengals. They were great against the Cowboys, but they spread the ball around in week 3. But here's the thing that stood out to me about this Ravens defense. The top target getter for every team that Baltimore's faced so far has had at least 5 receptions. Well, guess who's been the top target getter in every single game for the Washington Commanders this year? It's Zach Ertz. No, I'm just kidding. It's Terry McLaurin. Of course, it's Terry McLaurin. I'd be a little more cautious about McLaurin if I thought that the Commanders would be able to run the football. But there's 2 things going on there. Number one, Brian Robinson has been their lead running back. He didn't practice all week. He's a game-time decision. Number 2, Baltimore was averaging less than 3 yards per carry going into their matchup last week against the Bengals. And what they had to do against Cincinnati was basically bail out on stopping the run because they were trying to defend the pass. I don't know if they're going to necessarily do that to start the game against the Commanders. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for McLaurin to get 5, maybe even 6 catches. I'm going over on his receptions at -111.
That's fair enough. And I think you guys are right. This is going to be a very high scoring game. Jaden Daniels, the likely rookie of the year versus the reigning, likely, I know Proppy, and you have him everywhere in fantasy football. By the way, Uncle Dave, not cool beating me on Monday night with the Kareem Hunt.
It's all right. Sorry about that.
I was so looking forward to glow. Yeah, I am. I was upset about that. Proppy knows that. All right, let's move. Let's move back to
that's like this week.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, you guys play each other?
Yeah.
It's the Uncle Dave
It's
tidal
so
wave.
cute. It's so cute. You guys, oh, Uncle Dave, we love you. Come play in our fantasy league. Please come play. And yeah, sure, I'm going to come play. But, you invited the wolf to the hen house, guys.
It's just a rough go for the other three of us on the show, Jake, myself, and Proppy. In no order, let me just say. I think I have the lowest points in the league. Not pretty. All right, Proppy, let's talk about a player that went off against his old team last week, DJ Moore. Now he went from playing against Carolina to playing against the other expansion team from 1995, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this game is going to be played in London. Do you like DJ Moore's over or under?
I like DJ Moore's over, EC, and we're going back to the proverbial well as we backed DJ Moore last week. I am backing him again, and what is an even better matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars? The Jacksonville Jaguars right now are the league's worst pass defense. Looking at some of these metrics, they are absolutely putrid. They get zero pressure as well, in addition to being just an awful coverage unit. 32nd, that's dead last in EPA per dropback. 29th in explosive pass percentage. 29th in first read EPA. That means they're giving up a tremendous amount of production to the opposing quarterback's first read, which is DJ Moore here. 24th in double team rate. They're not double teaming the opposing number one option either. 27th in PFF's coverage grade. 32nd in blitz rate. They're not blitzing either. So number one wide receivers have absolutely torched them. That's why we've been targeting guys, not only targeting them, but targeting their alt lines as well, because they contain massive upside, because Jacksonville also has the capability, as we saw last week, of pushing teams as well, because Trevor Lawrence finally showed some signs of life here. So you cannot ask for a better matchup right now than this Jacksonville Jaguars pass defense. That's why I'm backing DJ Moore, coming off of that big performance, his best game of the season. I think he keeps momentum going. Caleb Williams is really also a big factor here. He is starting to show signs why he was the number one overall draft pick. He's looked a little bit better each and every week, culminating in his best game of the season last week. And again, he gets an absolutely fantastic matchup. When he has time and he takes things slow in the pocket, doesn't try to do too much, he's looked really good. So I'm still very bullish on Caleb Williams, despite the slow start, even though I'm a massive Jaden Daniels truther. I still think Caleb Williams is going to be an excellent quarterback in his own right, but also love the fact that Keenan Allen back in the lineup, Roma Dunze also contributing there. So yeah, getting other guys to take a little bit of pressure off of DJ Moore. I love this spot. We got this out at 61.5 early in the week on the early edge to our subscribers and those of you who watch our morning show. This has ticked up to 64.5. I'm comfortable playing this all the way up to 67 or 68.5 receiving yards, but love DJ Moore and what is a fantastic matchup.
All right, Proppy, I got to do this. Sia's in the chat. Our guy Sia Najad in the chat. I know what Uncle Dave's thinking. The name of the Jacksonville football team is the
Jaguars.
Uncle Dave, just because go ahead.
Oh, I have to say it? Or
Yeah, you got to say it. Yeah.
Jaguars.
Okay, there we go. Just
What?
It said Jaguars. Just we kid each other. No, I'm kidding here. All right.
Mr. Najad, Sia, great seeing you last night on our Thursday night football stream. For those of you that are new to this program, Sia used to be a staple here. He was on here with Uncle Dave and I for, I believe, a season and a half, maybe even, close to 2 full seasons. So great to see Sia in the chat. He has a wealth of knowledge in the prop and fantasy game as well. So I'd certainly take advantage of him for all of those of you in the chat.
He is a genius, and he crushed it in DFS last week. So good job. Sia, look for his props. Make sure to ask him some questions before he gets going here soon. Now, Uncle Dave, let's talk running backs catching, receiving props. So last night I bet Zach Charbonnet over 15, or it was over 12.5. He had a 15-yard catch, one catch, got it done for me.
Nice.
You're going with Javonte Williams at a higher number than that. What's the logic here?
The logic is he's been crushing this number. It's 18.5 receiving yards. We're going over at minus 119. When I say he's gone over this, EC, he's gone way over this in 3 of his past 4 games. It's helped that he's seen a target per route run rate this year of 23.3%. This is a Sean Payton staple. You can go back to Sean Payton's days as a play caller with the Giants. He has always leaned into his running backs as outlets for his quarterbacks, and he will also design plays for his running backs to catch passes. And on top of that, he's averaging nearly 8 yards per catch. So he doesn't necessarily need a bunch of catches in order to come through on this over. He's taking on the Chargers this week. The Chargers are good in terms of defensive metrics against running backs through the air, but teams have thrown against them a ton, at least to their running backs. 3 times out of 4, opponents of the Bolts have thrown to their running backs at least 8 times per game. And remember, they've only played 4 games. So this is something that's happening. I think it's because the Chargers play a lot of zone coverage. They keep the safeties back. They don't want to give up the bix play. Will they mix that up this week against the Broncos? It's possible, but even in that type of situation, that just means that they'll blitz more, and that means Bo Nix has to get rid of that ball quickly. What better way to get rid of it quickly than to the running back who gets a lot of catches every single week and gets a lot of yardage to boot? So Javonte Williams, over 18.5 receiving yards at -119. I might pump the brakes if the number gets to 20.5, but until then, we're taking this over all day long.
Fair enough. I like that. Good logic there. It's tough with those running back props because you just don't know. I mean, Charbonnet only had 1 catch for me last night. He had averaged 2.5 to 3 a game. But Javonte Williams, especially in that offense with Bo Nix and being a check down king, makes a lot of sense. All right, I'm going to get in here to make one pick here. Tank Dell, over 56.5 receiving yards. I'm putting 1.5 units on this one, 1.5 units. So we know that Nico Collins is out for the next 4 weeks, and he had a 29% target share. So where does CJ Stroud spread the ball now? You look at Stephon Diggs, that makes a lot of sense, but he's likely going to be shadowed by Christian Gonzalez, who's New England's top cover corner. Dell thus far has a 13% target share and first read share, but I think that's going to go up significantly. And we've already seen some signs of growth from Tank Dell recently. He has caught 9 of 10 targets for 100 yards combined in the last 2 weeks. I think he gets over 70 yards here, maybe even higher than that. So I am rolling with the over 56.5 from Tank Dell. Let's say 7 catches, 65 yards from CJ Stroud for a 1.5 unit play. Going with that, we'll see if that works out. Now, Uncle Dave's going to play this differently. Nico Collins is out. I talked about Tank Dell. We know Stephon Diggs is probably going to be shadowed by Gonzalez, as I mentioned. So, Uncle Dave, who is left to throw to for the Texans?
Well, first of all, just on the point about Stephon Diggs getting shadowed by Christian Gonzalez, when Gonzalez is lined up this year, the overwhelming majority of his snaps have come as an outside cornerback. He does not go into the slot, and that's usually where Stephon Diggs lines up. Will Stephon Diggs continue to line up in the slot? That's a question mark now that Nico Collins is out. Also, because Christian Gonzalez has occasionally lined up in the slot, the Patriots might be okay with him shadowing Stephon Diggs. So that makes me a little nervous about taking any Stephon Diggs props, but it does encourage me on what you said about Tank Dell, and it definitely encourages me on my prop. I'm laying a sprinkle on Dalton Schultz over 3.5 receptions at +120. He was over this total last week for the first time, and it's not coincidental that it happened in the game that Nico Collins left with an injury. Case in point, Schultz had a 19% target share. That's pretty good for a tight end. He also has a career catch rate of 69%. So if Stroud throws this 30 times, we're looking at 6 targets for Dalton Schultz. And based on his career numbers, 4 grabs absolutely in play. And for what it's worth, EC, the Patriots have allowed at least 4 catches to a tight end in 3 straight games. I'm not going full unit on this one. Let's go half unit, especially at plus money.
I like that, Uncle Dave. You know, I love those historical trends. Now, Proppy will get on me for some of those, but that makes, 3 out of 4, something like that. Yeah, there's something there where they're giving up, points and receptions to the tight end. Proppy, you also have a tight end prop, and this one to me looks really, really low, considering that Jake Ferguson in his last 3 games has a combined 19 catches and has gone over this total in 3 straight. Where do you line up with Ferguson against the Lions?
I love Jake Ferguson, EC. I've been a Jake Ferguson truther heading into this year, and he is proven to be an elite tight end, and we are in the midst of a Jake Ferguson breakout, and he is far and away the second option in one of the league's highest volume passing attacks. So, yeah, I love Jake Ferguson here. No Brandon Cooks. He is clearly Dak's second favorite target. He is, as you mentioned, eclipsed this in 3 consecutive games. He's on pace for 93 receptions and 973 yards here. Facing a pass defense that is 28th in dropback success percentage, 21st in EPA per dropback. If we look at some of Ferguson's metrics, 21% target share, that's 91st percentile for tight ends, 19% first read per target, that's 98th percentile at tight ends as well. He has 1.85 yards per route run, 95th percentile, and 62% slot rate, which is 97th percentile. So love to see all of these as well. He's also coming off of the season best snap share of 75%. So there's still some meat on the bone with Jake Ferguson, in my opinion. And then we get the fantastic matchup that is the Detroit Lions, who are very capable and likely to push Dallas. Dallas just inability to have a consistent ground game is just going to keep them throwing the football. So I expect double-digit target upside for Jake Ferguson, who has been just fantastic. I think he keeps things rolling here. Love him over 48.5 receiving yards. I'd play this one up to 53.5. His reception line is 5.5 at plus money. I like that quite a bit, but I do have a slight lean to the yards here, but I expect him to continue to be one of Dak's favorite targets.
I am feeling good about that Jake Ferguson play because I will have a corresponding play a little bit later in the show a correlating play, let's say, later in the show that we will discuss. All right, before we go and talk about running backs and quarterbacks, let's talk about kickers, my favorite subject. We've hit these recently, so let's give it another shot with Chase McLaughlin, over 1.5 field goals. I hate laying minus 155, but I'm going with 1.5 units on this one. New Orleans in 4 games this season, or in their last 4 games, has given up 4 made field goals in 3 of them, which is a lot. We won't count Carolina in week 1. And McLaughlin has 2 or more field goals in 4 of 5 games this year. That's all I need. I mean, normally I would take whoever's facing Tennessee, but we have to diversify it for purposes of this program. And therefore, we're going with Tampa Bay's kicker over 1.5 field goals and laying that juice at minus 155. All right. I know I just talked about field goals, but how about touchdowns? We've all had our first touchdown bet called back before. BetMGM is giving you a second chance. With BetMGM's Pro Football Second Chance, place any first touchdown score bet. If your player doesn't score first but scores second, get your entire stake back in cash. No opt-in required. Here is how it works. Place a pregame straight first touchdown score bet in any NFL game. And if your player scores the first touchdown in the game, you win your wager as normal. If your player scores the second touchdown in the game, you'll get your stake back in cash. It's that simple. Log into BetMGM for more details. Coming up next, courtesy of Propstarz, which running back is going to break out of his season-long slump? You'll find out after we hear from one of our sponsors.
It's a team almost too good to be true.
You guys ain't ready for us.
Kick your game day off right as the Tops team tackles all the biggest headlines around the league.
Who's got 2 thumbs and loves this next segment?
Sunday mornings on CBS Sports Network.
All right, Uncle Dave, quick one for you from Mark in the chat. Tucker Kraft over 39.5 receiving yards. Yay or nay?
I like that one a lot. I'm expecting a high-scoring game between the Packers and the Cardinals and could absolutely see Tucker Kraft getting 40, if not 50 yards.
All right, so I've really been waiting for Proppy to pick a prop, and it's only taken 6 weeks to get for this player. I'm waiting for this breakout. I read Uncle Dave's articles. I read his trade value chart. Fade, but not this week. Who is he talking about, Proppy, and why are we excited about this player this week?
We're talking about Bijan Robinson, none other than Bijan Robinson. I'm going over 65.5 rushing yards here versus the Carolina Panthers. Look, I have been a Bijan Robinson truther, despite not having backed him very much this season. If this is the epitome or the definition of a get right matchup for Bijan, if he does not have a big game here, it's officially time to sound the alarms. But I'm fairly confident he's going to have a big game here. First and foremost, he has elite usage, which you love to see. 75% snap share, that's 93rd percentile at running back. 62% team attempt share, that's 90 percentile as well. So we love the workloads that Bijan's been receiving. And then he's facing a Carolina defense that's just been dreadful. The rush defense has been dreadful. We know Kirk Cousins as well is still recovering from that Achilles injury. I think the Falcons want to protect him by limiting his dropbacks. And I also think they want to get their stud running back going. And this is the matchup to do that. Carolina, 25th in EPA per rush, 32nd in run stop win rate. So you can't ask for a much better matchup on paper. I think Bijan has a big game. I think he has a big second half of the season. I think we'll look at this game potentially as that jumping off point when he kind of got things going in the right direction. So give me Bijan. I think he goes for triple digits here. So this is another spot where I'm going to be betting his alt lines in addition to going over 65.5 rushing yards.
All right, Dave, I got to ask you, based on everything Proppy said, I'm a Bijan truther as well. Are you in or out on Bijan this week and going forward?
Well, for the purposes of this player prop, I'm absolutely in. And for the purposes of fantasy football, given the matchup this week, I'm in. But you said going forward, and we're thinking rest of season type stuff here, I might be out. And the reason why is because what the Falcons have decided to do is run a scheme of offense, well, a run scheme called outside zone. And it's a very specific type of scheme. Bijan runs it well, but Tyler Algier runs it better. And the type of run game that Bijan works in, the Falcons, for whatever reason, they don't do it. It's called gap scheme. It's when the big guys just knock over other guys on defense. Man, he crushed at that at Texas, and he crushed at that in his first year in the league. But for whatever reason this year, it's not working out for Bijan Robinson, and that frustrates me as someone who wants to see him get 120 yards a game. I want to see him. You heard Proppy talk about the usage. I don't know if the usage has been that great for fantasy purposes. We drafted him with the expectation that he'd have 20-plus touches, something like that, and he doesn't get there anymore. So I would say that if he has the game that Propstarz is saying, then you might want to consider selling high on him. Try turning him into just any other running back that you want in fantasy. You want to try and get Saquon Barkley, you can go for it. If Alvin Kamara is your guy, you can almost certainly get that if Bijan has a big game this week. But what I would expect to see is Bijan getting a huge workload this week, Tyler Algier getting about half as many touches, both of them doing well because it's Carolina and they're terrible, and Prop did a good job of expressing that. But the matchups moving forward are not going to be easy, and I kind of feel like the Falcons realized last week that they can lean on Kirk Cousins. And if they're going to do that, that means they're throwing more, running less.
Proppy.
I still think Atlanta ultimately is going to run the football quite a bit, particularly in this matchup. Obviously, we're talking about a 1 week spot here versus the rest of the season. And I do agree. I think Dave made some great points, particularly regarding Atlanta's running the football in a gap scheme versus a zone scheme. I think part of that is the personnel. They have one of the lightest, if not the lightest, offensive lines in the league. So that is somewhat by design.
Yes.
And I agree with your points, Dave, that he would benefit him, obviously, if he was in more of a traditional gap scheme. So just great points by Dave, and just wanted to highlight that Atlanta's personnel, their offensive line is very light by design, that they can get out, the guards can pull, and they can attack the edges.
And they're beat up. Their right tackle isn't at 100%. They're on their backup center. Listen, these things would matter if they were taking on a tough run defense, and they have, and you've seen it with Bijan's numbers. But Carolina, first of all, here's the best part. Carolina is not good at defending outside zone runs. So the
Yes.
type of runs that the Falcons prefer to use, the Panthers are going to struggle. And that means the Falcons should thrive. So, yeah, let's keep it in a 1 week bubble, EC, and say that Bijan's a top 5 fantasy running back.
You know what? I mean, for those of us who drafted Bijan all over the place, bring back Arthur Smith, for goodness sakes. They're not using him any different. I'm literally yearning for the days of Arthur Smith in Atlanta after watching Zach Robinson call it the offense. All right. One guy who is not yearning to be back in his old team for his old team, even though they're doing okay. And I have a prop on a running back related to that. Derrick Henry, Uncle Dave, has absolutely been crushing it in Baltimore. I mean, he starts off against Buffalo in week 4. First play of the game, 80-something yard run. He's gone over every week. So now he's facing the Commanders, who don't have a great run defense. Which way are we leaning?
I mean, you're pretty much making the case for me, EC. You should keep going. You're doing great.
No, I'm saying, is this the week that we fade Derrick Henry?
Oh, you're trying to make people think that I'm going to actually say that Derrick Henry is someone you should bet against? Take your hard-earned money and bet against Derrick Henry? Do you think I would even consider saying such a thing? Look, there's 2 names you're going to hear on every single one of our shows until further notice. Derrick Henry is one. Josh Jacobs is the other. And that's me foreshadowing. But Derrick Henry over 82.5 rushing yards, even at minus 115. Listen, that's not that much juice. That's from BetMGM. I think he's worth taking. He's crushed defenses for at least 84 yards in 4 straight games. And even if he needed a miraculous 51-yard jaunt in overtime last week to hit that mark, he still did it. And that game last week saw him get just 15 rushes. That's kind of an off day for Derrick Henry, considering his prior 2 games. So he might be a little bit fresher and a little bit more ready to go against a Commanders run defense that just is not good. I don't know if they're as bad as the Panthers. Actually, I do. They're not, but they're pretty close to it. They allow 5.3 yards per carry to running backs. 45.5% of the runs that they see go at least 5 yards, and 20.9%. I should just round this up, right? 21% of the runs that they see go for 10 plus yards. These are terrible metrics for a defense, but they are perfect for anybody who wants to back Derrick Henry. In fact, all 3 of the marks that I said, league worst across the board. So maybe Carolina is a better run defense than Washington. Listen, the Commanders shut down the Browns' run game last week. So what? Cleveland can't run the ball. Their offensive line's in terrible shape. This is a totally different offense with one of the best backs going. Don't even think twice about it. Derrick Henry is going to get you at least 90 yards, if not 137 yards.
Okay.
What would you play it up to, Dave?
Yeah.
Let's play that up to 84.5, just to be safe.
Okay. Would you consider laddering over 100?
Oh, you could sprinkle to the 90 mark, into the 100-yard mark, into the 110-yard mark. Sure.
Now, Proppy, Uncle Dave set the tease perfectly. We're going to talk about Derrick Henry a lot. We're also going to talk about Josh Jacobs a lot. And this line against an Arizona rush defense that also isn't very good seems a bit low. So are we buying or selling Josh Jacobs this week?
We are buying, and that was a smooth transition by the great Hall of Famer, Uncle Dave Richard here. And I'm going right back to the proverbial well of Josh Jacobs after last week cashing him on our first 2-unit victory of the season there. So that was a great thing that happened. Also, in addition to being my largest single position of the season, I think I mentioned that on stream, was Josh Jacobs last week. So that was good to see. And I'm going right back to him against Arizona. We're talking about bad defenses. That's been a theme. Dave and I picking on some really terrible run defenses here. And here is another one. They are right up there with Washington, with Carolina here. Arguably the league's worst overall defense. I think the Cardinals have a great case for it. As far as the rush defense is concerned, 23rd in EPA per rush, 28th in rush success percentage, 31st in run stop win rate. Last week we have Josh Jacobs coming off of a season high 75% snap share versus the Rams. So that was good to see, because there was some questions regarding his usage heading into that matchup that I personally wasn't worried about. But there were some questions there. Josh Jacobs is having a fairly good year as far as the efficiency metrics are concerned. He's averaging 20.8 breakaway yards per game. The reason that's relevant to me is because he looked a little cooked last year running behind that Raiders offensive line and just had some massive workloads there, but he's running well. I think he'll be the focal point of the offense. Green Bay's projected team total in this, I think, is something like 26.5 points, as high as any individual team this week. So certainly a matchup we're going to see Green Bay effectively move the football, and I think Josh Jacobs will continue to be the focal point of the offense. I think he sees upwards of 15 to 20 carries in this game. It's a fantastic matchup. I personally expected this line to be somewhere between 72 and 75.5, so I think 66.5 presents some tremendous value here. I'd play this one all the way up to 71.5 rushing yards. Love Josh Jacobs in this matchup. I think he continues to dominate touches in that backfield. I think he continues to rip off some big chunks in the second half, and it's a great matchup versus the Arizona Cardinals.
Always. Let me remind you, I know we're a little bit later in the show for me to say this, but make sure to always have your notifications on when it comes to the SportsLine app, because if you're a member and you get that, Proppy's going to put these lines out as soon as he sees them at all hours of the night. I mean, you never know with Propstarz.
Proppy doesn't sleep.
Proppy, I literally don't know if you do. Proppy does not sleep. You want to get these notifications because this Josh Jacob line, it's going to go up. So you want to get this as low as possible. Let's hit it. Just make sure to have those SportsLine notifications on. And as always, I like to
the best chance of winning. There's something we'll talk about here called CLV, also known as closing line value. That is when you beat the market. Let's say I'm betting on Josh Jacobs. I get him at 66.5 rushing yards. He ends up closing at, let's say, 73.5 rushing yards. So you've got yourself quite a bit of closing line value in that scenario. You're always looking to beat the market here as well. It's certainly a good indicator if you're on the right side. So if you're a bettor at home and you're trying to realize if your bets are sharp, I would say that's the easiest way to determine whether or not it's based on that closing line value.
Well, and as I always like to mention on here, if you are not a SportsLine member and want the absolute best deal, and you are on X or Twitter, make sure to send me a message, and I will pass along the best promo codes that I can find just for you guys, courtesy of watching the SportsLine NFL Prop Show. Just want to point that out. All right, coming up next, Uncle Dave is going to give us 2 passing props, including his favorite prop of the week. But first, let's hear from one of our sponsors.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
All right. I actually got so excited to give the SportsLine tease that I forgot to give my rushing prop. So here we go. Just how it goes sometimes on the shows. This is what live shows are always fun. I'm going Tony Pollard over 85.5 rushing plus receiving yards at -120. This is all about volume. His touches through the first 4 games, 19, 22, 9, and 24. He has 90 or more total yards in 3 of 4 games, and he has more than a 15% target share for the Tennessee Titans. What I also want to mention, we've talked about bad rushing defenses. The Indianapolis Colts are giving up the 2nd most rushing yards per game, slightly below the Rams. So I'm going to play anything against the Colts that I can. Let's do it. Tony Pollard, this number, I would play it up to 100, honestly. That's how excited I am about playing Tony Pollard this week. I know Jonathan Taylor for the Colts. I think Tennessee's going to be in a spot where they're ahead, and Tony Pollard is going to have a 100-yard game on the ground. If not on the ground, maybe a couple catches will put him there, but I think he at least eclipses 85.5 rushing plus receiving yards. All right, Uncle Dave, now it's time for passing props. You have your favorite play of the week based on units, 1.5 units. Just going to say this. Who is it and why?
It's Jared Goff, and it's an under, EC. I'm taking the under on his pass attempts, 33.5, and I see it at minus 119. You should shop that around. Listen, Goff's had under 25 pass attempts in each of his past 2 games. Both wins, by the way, and what were expected to be high-scoring games, kind of like this game is supposed to be. And Goff's been under 30 pass attempts in 3 of 4 games this season. It just so happens that the Lions are catching the Cowboys without run-stopping linebacker Eric Kendricks. He's not going to play. That should make the matchup all the better for the Lions' running game, which has been awesome this season. It's Jahmyr Gibbs. It's David Montgomery. Yeah, everybody in the world has been taking David Montgomery on anytime touchdowns. Everybody's going to continue to do that. The matchup's just really that good. And on top of that, center Frank Ragnow back playing for the Lions. So that just makes that offensive line even better. I suspect the Lions will aim to control the clock and pound Dallas with the run. That takes the ball out of Jared Goff's hands. That's been a winning formula for them. Here's the sneaky part. 3 of the past 4 teams against Dallas threw the ball 28 or fewer times. 2 of those teams won, one of them very convincingly, and the third lost on a last-second touchdown. That's the Steelers last week. So teams don't have to throw to beat the Dallas Cowboys, and I don't think the Lions are gonna.
So I love what Big Cheesy said here in the chat. He said, life is too short to take an under, but when Uncle Dave finds one, I tail. Proppy, you also are the under king. And as you've always told me, it's a lot easier to hit an under than an over. Is that correct?
Certainly, EC. A lot more paths to victory when we're talking about unders. As we saw last night, I backed Jordan Mason, I faded Jordan Mason on his rushing yards. In hindsight, I would say wasn't my best play call or play selection, but because of the amount of paths to victory with unders, injuries being a big reason a guy can stay under, I was fortunate enough to cash that prop. So, yeah, unders just are very sharp, considered much sharper action. They're a bit counterintuitive, so they're a little harder to find for bettors. But, yeah, I think as long as you're playing quite a few unders, you're in good shape.
All right, well, sorry, Proppy. I'm going with an over here in this game. Dak Prescott over 277.5 passing yards. I've seen this as high as like 284, something like that. And I'm still playing the over. I think he goes over 300 here. So he's over this number in 3 of his last 5 games and 11 of his last 17 dating back to last year. And part of the reason that he goes over is because the volume is huge. He's had 39 or more attempts in those 3 games that he has gone over this season. He had 345 yards against Detroit last year on 38 passing attempts. By the way, he is second in the league in passing attempts, third in passing yards per game. Expect Proppy's Jake Ferguson prop to hit. CD Lamb is going to go off. Remember, he had over 200 yards against Detroit last year. Dak Prescott's going over 300. This is my ladder play of the week that I'm going a little bit higher. All right, Uncle Dave, you have one final play here. It is a rookie who has never started a game before. This has to be an under, right?
No, this is going to be an over. We're taking an over on Drake May, but it's his pass attempts. And the number's low, you see. It's 28.5. I'm taking that over, minus 117. And with Ramondre Stevenson out for the Patriots, they should be compelled into throwing more. And what better time for that to happen than in their prized rookie's very first NFL start? This is a team that threw the ball 30-plus times in each of its past 2 games anyway. So dialing up throws isn't that rare for them. And game script should also be something that favors Drake May because the Texans, even without Nico Collins, figure to put some points up and force the Patriots to chase. In fact, Houston has seen 30-plus pass attempts in 3 of its past 4 games and 28 pass attempts in each of the 4. So right there, you know that teams are throwing against Houston. That's what the Patriots figure to do. They should want to see what Drake May can do. And so we should capitalize on that. I'm putting a unit out on this one, and I would probably play it up to 29.5 pass attempts as well.
Proppy, go ahead. You want to chime in on this one?
As I often say, it's these rookies or unheralded players or guys that, Dave has been watching who the odds makers just frankly don't have very much information on. So these are the opportunities, aka opportunities that we often talk about, where the odds makers are just frankly behind the 8 ball, and they're just defaulting to very basic numbers, in my opinion. So I think this is a great spot for Dave to speculate a little bit, and this pick has my full endorsement.
All right, Uncle Dave, I have a bonus pick for you. Lori asked it a little bit earlier in the chat. George Pickens over 46.5 receiving yards against the Raiders. Yay or nay?
I am nay on anything George Pickens until I know for a fact that he's going to be active for the game. There seems to be something going on between Pickens and the coaching staff. And the last week he played his fewest amount of snaps on the season. There seems to be some sort of ornery attitude coming from Pickens. So even if I like this one and the number's just okay, I still wouldn't play it until I knew that he was for sure playing. And it's a great matchup against Las Vegas. One of the plays I almost took, it was another under with a quarterback. This is unofficial, but Justin Fields under, I think it was like 26.5 pass attempts. Because I think the Steelers are just going to be able to run. And they're getting Jaylen Warren back. And that was my guy last year. And I wonder if he's going to end up taking a lot of work away from Najee Harris. Point being, the Steelers now have 2 running backs. Hopefully, that they'll definitely have Najee. Jalen's questionable for the game. They might have 2 running backs that they'll be able to utilize. And if they're going to be able to run on Las Vegas, that means that Fields won't have to throw. And if Fields doesn't have to throw that much, then I would be a little sensitive to taking any overs on George Pickens player props.
Fair enough. And I love the Steelers. That'd be my favorite line this week. I think the Raiders are terrible. Just pointing that out. I know this is a prop show, but going to throw it in there. All right. It is time for the recap. Let's get to it right here. We got Propstarz. He's on Josh Jacobs over 66.5 rushing yards. Bijan Robinson, it's the breakout week, over 65.5 rushing yards. He thinks he'll go over 100. Zay Flowers over 54.5 receiving yards. Proppy said to ladder that one. DJ Moore over 61.5 receiving yards. And Jake Ferguson over 48.5 receiving yards. Uncle Dave is on Jared Goff under 33.5 passing attempts. And Drake May over 28.5 passing attempts. Derrick Henry over 82.5 rushing yards. Terry McLaurin over 4.5 receptions. Sorry about that. Javonte Williams over 18.5 receiving yards, and a sprinkle on Dalton Schultz over 3.5 catches at plus 120. Getting some good odds there. I'm going with Dak Prescott over 277.5 passing yards. Tony Pollard over 85.5 rushing plus receiving yards. I'd play that up to 100. Tank Dell over 56.5 receiving yards. And Chase McLaughlin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over 1.5 field goals. All right, Proppy, your favorite prop from Uncle Dave is?
A toss-up between Derrick Henry and Drake May. I like both quite a bit. I think they both cash, but I will go with old faithful Derrick Henry. I expect him to run roughshod over this Washington Commanders defense in what is certainly or projects to be a high-scoring affair between 2 very explosive offenses. So I like Derrick Henry's chances of hitting triple digits in this matchup.
Quick one for you, Dave, from Taylor before I ask you about Proppy. Over 24.5 rushing yards for Drake May. Yay or nay?
I looked at that one too. I don't hate that one. I think that's worth a sprinkle, maybe quarter unit, half unit. It is his first game, but I do know that on 16 dropbacks that he had against the Jets in week 3, he ran 2 times. That's 1 out of every 8. Okay, so if he's going to drop back, let's call it 32 times, just make it nice and easy. So that means 4 rushes. He might be able to get you 20 yards on there. He is an athletic quarterback, and he's an upgrade for sure for New England over Jacoby Brissett. Wouldn't surprise me if he ended up with 30, 33 rushing yards in the game.
All right, Uncle Dave, your favorite of Proppy's plays this week is?
It's going to be Jake Ferguson over 48.5 receiving yards. I think that's just the safest one. We know that the Cowboys do have CeeDee Lamb. Jalen Tolbert's one of my favorite kind of sleeper plays for week 6 in fantasy. We've been talking about him a lot on our Fantasy Football Today show. And when I say a lot, I mean like week 3, week 4, we started talking about him. And now here he is with a big role in the Cowboys offense. But I think especially if the Lions are going to run the ball a lot, the Cowboys are going to throw a lot. And that should mean a lot of yardage for Jake Ferguson.
Guys, it's always a blast to be on with you. I learned so much. Thank you to all of you out there watching, listening, interacting with us during the show. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to smash that like button for us. Thanks to producer Jake, the best in the business, for always making us look good. For Uncle Dave and Proppy, I am EC. And as I always like to say, let's hit it big. Good luck.